there fellow book nerds, this is High on Books and today I am going to review Malice by John Gwynne, the first book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. This is a fairly famous book among fantasy readers, but I went into it with little to no expectations. And despite that, Malice did manage to surprise me in a lot of pleasant ways. It doesn't mean this book does not have any flaws. It surely has some and I've got few criticisms lined up, but we will get to them in a while. Malice is an epic war fantasy story told from multiple POVs, which takes place in a world called the Banished Lands. There is a lot going on in this book. There are gods, kings, giants, elementals, pirates, all sorts of things here, but none of them felt forced. John Gwynne has blended them all and created an entertaining story. People categorize this as dark fantasy, but it doesn't have anything dark going on in it. And I do not mean it as a criticism, because it's not like that this book pales in comparison to dark fantasy books. The thing is, it never tried to tread those waters. After reading the first book, I felt Malice is more of a coming-of-age action fantasy story, which heavily focuses on combat. And well-written action scenes is one of the strong and defining points of this book. The language here is easy and direct, and it provides an immersive experience. This book has typical fantasy tropes, but how well it uses them will make you appreciate it. Now, talking about the few criticisms that I have of this book. The first half of this book was a drag. The plot moved very slowly and it tested my patience. But once you get through it, you'll find second half to be immensely enjoyable and it's worth all the trouble. Second criticism that I have is a very personal thing and many readers will not even consider it as a criticism. But I'm dropping it anyway. So, whenever I'm reading a book with multiple POVs, an author shifts viewpoint to other character, leaving us with a cliffhanger, it pisses me off. Because by the time we get back to that scene, the interest is a little bit ebbed away and my mind is occupied with other things in the story. But as I said earlier, this comes down to personal taste, and if you're a reader like me, it will come to annoy you. Our next criticism will have some spoilers, because now we will be talking about conveniences. So if you haven't read the book and if you're planning to, jump to this timestamp for the final thoughts. Conveniences. Malice is full of conveniences. Things happen just for the sake of happening when it doesn't make any sense for them. For instance, there were horrible things happening in Baglan Forest, but these intelligent people still decided to celebrate Hunt there because the author wanted to give Corbin a Vulvan and he couldn't find a better way to do it. So he sent them in a forest which was home to bandits, Vulvans, large snake, fox and God knows what. And this choice made otherwise smart characters look stupid. Then we have commoners like a blacksmith's son and a stable girl walking freely into the king's private chamber with the princess. And if that wasn't enough, we have the princess spying on the queen for these very commoners. That just doesn't make any sense. Then you see this happening very often in this book. When the good guys are in trouble and are overwhelmed in the time of crisis, someone just magically comes to their aid. Be it Castle being chased by giants or be it Veradis fighting them. Someone always popped up to help them when you thought they're about to die. Two words people, plot armor. This was all the criticism that I had of this book. Now let's go to the good part. There are two gods in this story. Elyon the good one who created all the things and Astaroth the bad one who hated all that Elyon has created. Astaroth schemed against Elyon's creation and corrupted them by sending a starstone to the earth. And from that, giants created objects of great power. As those objects started corrupting the giants, they started fighting among themselves. Enraged by this, Elyon decided to punish them. He was very close to destroying all his creation when he realizes that all of it was Astaroth's doing. Ashamed of his action, he retired to a place unknown so that he could mourn. Now very few giants are left and mankind is fighting them. And there is this prophecy which speaks of Astaroth's champion who will bring death and destruction to their world. It also speaks of Elyon's champion who will fight them. The people who ruled Banished Lands are divided on this prophecy. Few kings think that it speaks truth, others mock it. King Brannin and his people believes in it, and one of them is Corbin, a teenage boy. We are hinted that he is the chosen one, so the story mainly focuses on his journey. We also follow multiple characters and a lot of focus has been on them as well. But we'll talk about them when we discuss characters. The world building, I would say, is decent. We have several kingdoms and all of them stick to certain codes of conduct. When you're traveling from one kingdom to other, you do not see a striking difference between them. Their culture, their practices throughout this world are same, which I think is a bit of a letdown for an epic high fantasy. It talks a lot about gods, but never talks about how they worship them, what tenets do they follow, or what rituals do they stick to. The thing is, stories like The Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, A Song of Ice and Fire has given us such rich world that it has set the bar unrealistically high. And we tend to reject anything that doesn't come to that level. But if you talk about Malice, it's a very different kind of story in that regards, because it focuses on telling about events and things rather than describing or exploring them. And John Gwynne, I guess, knows his strength and is playing to it. So the world building, I would say, is not bad here. It basically is not as good and rich as fans of epic fantasy expect in today's time. We don't see magical stuff happening in this book until it needs to. Magic is used to move the plot, and the book plays somewhere between hard and soft magic system. There are people who can use earth power, use fire power, create glamour, but all of that happen in the backdrop and magic is not the main focus here. But there are 7 magical objects created from Starstone, and I believe when we explore them more in the following parts, the story will have more magical things happening in it, and it will slightly move towards hard magic system. First in line is Corbin, our protagonist. He wants to grow strong and serve his king. But the thing is, Corbin thinks that he is a coward who is often bullied by boys older than him. So he needs to learn a lot before he gets where he wants to be. We see him learning the ways of a warrior, we see him becoming more thoughtful, and when we finally see him standing up to his bullies and kicking their butt, specifically beating Rafe, we cheer for him. And reading this was kind of fulfilling. Next is Savin. Savin is Corbin's sister, and most of the time we see Corbin growing as a character through her. She helped the stable master Gar with horses and was shown really good with throwing knives, and we even see that skill being put to use. But as a character, we do not explore her much, and that is the problem with every character here. We don't get to see their emotional conflict. They lack depth and they are very basic and troopy with a subtle nuance to them. Then we have Veradis, and I hope I'm not butchering the names of these characters here. Anyway, Veradis was Prince Nathyr's right hand and later became his first sword when Nathyr sat on throne. He is driven by loyalty towards his king and kingdom and puts down any rational thoughts that speaks against them. The reason for this is, in the beginning he craved validation, and the very first person to grant him that was Nathyr. So this brought Nathyr his unquestionable loyalty. We as readers know that Nathyr is a bad guy, but Veradis doesn't know it yet. It will be interesting to see what he will do when he finally sees the truth. Because it's clear that this guy values friendship and his words and have a sense of right and wrong. But manipulation has worked deep into him and it will be hard for him to break and see through it. Then we have got Castel. Castel is nephew of King Romar of Isildur. His rivalry with his cousin Jael never allowed him to become friends with anyone in his hometown. So he always craved for friends and a sense of belonging, but he never got that. And when he finally finds a place where he is at peace, life throws him in a situation which he wasn't ready for. Despite having an interesting subplot to him, Castel is most easily forgettable viewpoint character in this book. And it probably is because we never got to see him the badass he could have been. Camlin has the most surprising arc. He started out as a brigand involved in child killing, but by then redeemed himself by saving Princess Adena and Savin. While reading, you know that there is some good in him, but the way his character played out, we just don't see that happening very often. Avnis is the one with whom the story kicks off. We see him selling himself to Astaroth in exchange of power. And what led him to that? Envy towards his own brother. There are some layers to this man. He cared for his wife and his son. So if there is any hope that this man would later turn good, it rests with his son Vaughn. And I'd like to see this character become more nuanced in the next book. Malice is an enjoyable read which heavily relies on typical fantasy tropes. It has a very basic theme of good versus evil and is written with sole intent to entertain you, not to make you ponder over some deep philosophical questions. The prose are not poetic or flowery and the writing style is direct. So if you're looking for an epic fantasy read that you can skim through, then Malice is the book for you. This is a very strong first part, so my rating for it is a solid 3.5 stars. It's a promising start for a setup book, so I am definitely picking up the next one in the series. For now, this is it people. Do tell me in the comments what you think of Malice. If you enjoyed the video, do like it and help this book nerd grow by subscribing the channel and sharing the video. I'll see you next time in my next video. Until then, my fellow book nerds, keep reading.